All right, let's talk about risk analysis. Now, I know it sounds super formal, maybe even a little intimidating, but honestly, it's just a smart way to think about the unknown. It's a game plan for anything you're doing, whether that's launching a new company, managing a big project, or heck, even just planning a vacation. So, picture this. You've got a great idea, right? Something you're really excited about. Could be a startup, a new direction at work, whatever. But there's always that little voice in the back of your head, isn't there? What if? See, every plan has a dose of uncertainty. The real trick isn't pretending things won't go wrong. It's asking, okay, what could go wrong? And what's my plan when it does? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. So here's the game plan for today. First up, we're going to get on the same page about what risk and opportunity really mean. Then we'll open up the toolkit and see how to actually deal with risk. And finally, we'll get our hands dirty with 3 awesome techniques: PRA for a quick overview, FMEA for a deep dive, and FTA for playing detective. Okay, first things first. We've got to nail down our definitions. Because here's the thing, you can't really talk about risk without also talking about its twin sister, opportunity. They're totally connected. It really is this simple. A risk? That's just some random thing that could happen that has a negative outcome. An opportunity? Well, it's also a random thing that could happen, but it has a positive outcome. At their core, they are the exact same concept. Just one's a thumbs down and the other's a thumbs up. Two sides of the exact same coin. So, if you want to really get a handle on any risk, you need to know its 3 essential parts. Think of it like a recipe. First, you need the scenario. What's the thing that could actually happen? Then, the probability. How likely is it to occur? And finally, the impact. If it does happen, what's the damage? Get those 3 pieces, and you've basically defined the risk. Okay, so you've identified your risks. Now what? Do you just sit there and worry about them? Absolutely not. You are not powerless here. It's time to open up the toolkit because you've got a bunch of strategies you can use. Let's start with being proactive. Your first option is just avoid the risk completely. Change the plan. So for example, instead of betting on some brand new, unproven piece of tech, you just stick with the reliable, tested stuff. Easy. Or you can go for reduction. Maybe you can't get rid of the risk, but you can definitely make it smaller or less likely to happen. Think extra quality control checks, that kind of thing. But sometimes you just have to live with a risk, right? You have to absorb it. And there are a few ways to do that. You could just accept it. This makes sense when fixing it would cost way more than the problem itself. Or you can have a contingency plan, a what we do if this happens playbook. Another great one is building in a reserve, just a little extra buffer of time or money, just in case. And finally, you can transfer the risk to someone else. And that, my friends, is basically the entire business model of insurance. Now, there's one more strategy, and it's going to sound kind of crazy at first. What if you actually increase the risk? Stay with me here. Imagine you're spending a ton of money to protect against something that's really, really unlikely to happen. Logically, the smart move is to stop spending so much. But try telling your team or your stakeholders, hey, we're going to be less safe now. As this quote puts it perfectly, sometimes a decision is logical, but it's just not going to fly with people. It's a tough spot to be in. Okay, so we've talked strategy. Now let's get into the actual tools you can use. The first one up is the preliminary risk analysis, or PRA. This is your go-to when you just need a quick, high-level look at what could go wrong with a new project. It's the perfect first step. Let's look at a real-world example to see how this works. Say we're moving a vaccine that needs to stay cold. Okay, one hazard is the temperature going up. The consequence? The vaccine is ruined. Simple enough. Then we just rate the likelihood of that happening and the severity if it does, usually on a scale, say from 1 to 5. And this is where the magic happens. You multiply those 2 numbers together, likelihood times severity, to get your risk score. In our example, a likelihood of 3 and a severity of 5 gives us 15. This single number is huge. It lets you instantly see which risks are the biggest and helps you prioritize where to focus your energy. It cuts through the noise. But sometimes, that big picture view just isn't detailed enough. You need to zoom in. That's when you pull out the FMEA, Failure Mode and Effects Analysis. This is for when you need to get really granular with a specific process. It's what we call a bottom-up analysis. You look at every little piece of the puzzle and ask, how could this specific part fail? And what would that do to the whole system? Now, the FMEA process is super structured. You figure out how things can fail, what happens when they do, and what causes it. So far, so good. You rate the severity and the occurrence, just like with PRA. But here's the crucial new piece. You also rate detection. In other words, how easy is it to spot this failure before it becomes a disaster? You put all three together, and that gives you your risk priority number. Let's go back to our vaccine example, but this time, let's look at the freezer alarm. A possible failure? The alarm doesn't send out a signal. So we rate its likelihood, its severity, and then its detection. Now here's a key point. A high detection score is bad. It means it's really hard to detect. So we multiply those three numbers, and boom, we get a risk priority number, or RPN, of 48. So this is the formula to remember. RPN is severity times occurrence times detectability. And that last part, detectability, is the secret sauce. It's what makes FMEA so incredibly useful. It pushes you past just thinking about what could fail and forces you to ask the really important question, would we even see it coming? And that brings us to our last tool, fault tree analysis, or FTA. This one completely flips the script. Remember how FMEA was bottom up? Well, FTA is top down. You put on your detective hat, you start with the big disaster, the failure has already happened, and you work backward, asking, okay, how in the world did we get here? What were all the causes? And the logic here is something we all do naturally. Let's take a simple example. You miss the bus. That's your top-level failure. From there, you just start brainstorming backwards. What could have caused it? Well, maybe the alarm didn't go off. Maybe there was traffic. You map out all the possible paths that lead to that one unfortunate outcome. You're building a visual story of the failure. Now, to build one of these maps properly, you use these things called logic gates. The two big ones you need to know are AND gates and OR gates. An AND gate is for when multiple things had to happen together to cause the problem. An OR gate is for when just one of several things was enough to cause it. Nailing the difference between AND and OR is honestly the most important part of getting an FTA right. All right, let's wrap this up with a quick rundown. Think of this as your cheat sheet. Need a fast, big-picture look at a new idea? Use PPRA. Need to get super detailed and analyze a specific process to prevent failures? That's a job for FMEA. And when something has already gone wrong and you need to play detective to find the root cause, you pull out the FTA. Each tool has its perfect time and place. Look, at the end of the day, that's what all of this is about, giving you a structured way to think about uncertainty. It helps you go from just worrying about what could go wrong to actually having a plan. It's about taking control. So now you have the toolkit. The only question left is, what's the first thing you're going to analyze?